In today's video, I'll give you the scoop on the latest drama at the lake property, how we spent our spring break, and the story of the Murd3r Armadillo. I'll also tell you the story of how Radar discovered his true calling and how I managed to get a bajillion injuries in just a few days. Welcome to Sara's Side Quests. I'm Sara. If you're new here and you like my particular brand of chaos, hit that subscribe button. If you already know what you're in for, press the like button. Or hey, hit both if you're feeling spicy. First things first. I originally intended on this video being my version of a get ready with me, except with plants. Since I hardly ever wear makeup. I was just going to give you the rundown on all the things while I planted these starter boxes with Irish moss. I even had this really sweet camera set up and everything. Turns out that with all my injuries and a complete lack of focus, I'm completely unable to hold a train of thought while dumping dirt in trays right now. So we're going to do a voiceover instead. Anyway, I decided that I don't want to deal with mowing grass at Camp Cowcumber. That's what we're calling the lake property now. So after researching, I think the best option for ground cover around the fire pit area is going to be Irish moss. Lowe's sells it, but it's $5 for each plug, and I have a decent area to cover. I've read that starting it from seeds is a challenge, but with the price delta, I thought I'd give it a try. I'll let you know when I fail completely and just buy the plugs from Lowe's. These seeds are from OutsidePride.com, and it was $8.99 for 10,000 seeds. When they say these seeds are tiny, they mean it. I ordered 2 packs, 20,000 seeds, and as you'll see, I struggled to get 1 pack to cover 175 slot tray. Outside Pride had the best price online, decent reviews, and a coupon code. Shipping was postal service and reasonably priced at $3.50. It got here in under a week from across the country. All of the other supplies are from Walmart because I didn't want to go out and they delivered to the house. Our lives have become consumed with the lake property lately. I think I mentioned some of this before, but our plan was to get power and septic installed and then get water service so that it didn't interfere with the other 2 services. We got through all the red tape over the winter and we got our septic permit in December. The highly recommended guy that we were going to use to install the system has not been in any kind of hurry to actually do so, and he's not exactly the best communicator. So there's been a lot of back and forth there. Getting Alabama Power to run electricity to our property has been the biggest frustration too. I'm sure it's complicated, but I really do not understand why this is such a problem when people up and down the same road already have power. We're going on 8 months at this point. In addition to the utter lack of progress, we'd started spending at least one day every weekend driving the 90 minutes down there, working all day on various things, and then dragging ourselves home after dark. Even though we were making small progress doing things ourselves, it really began to feel like every single thing involving this place was suddenly on hard mode. Progress was super slow, equipment and tools were breaking left and right, and if something could go wrong, it did. I hit my breaking point the last week of February because I needed something to happen. I needed a win, even if it was a small one. I called the water company, and long story short, if I wrote a check for a somewhat absurd amount of money for water service, they'd install the water to the driveway area in about 2 weeks. And you know what? I actually believed it. Sweet summer child. I drove down the next day to give them the money and fill out the paperwork. In my defense, Jay believed it too. He ordered all the things he'd need to get the water from the road to the pad area where we would eventually park the RV so that he'd be ready when it was installed. A stake had been placed near the driveway indicating placement of something that we thought was the water company, but turns out was actually a marker for Alabama Power. And then the septic guy called a couple days later and said that he'd install the tank lines the next week, the first week of March. Were things actually progressing? Here's where I really screwed up. Spring break for the boys was March 16th through 20th. There were some scheduling conflicts with S, so we didn't have any travel plans. A was itching for an adventure, and honestly, so was I. I was also really tired of driving back and forth. My dumb self thought we would be able to take the RV down there, park it out of the way, and be able to stay there for the week while we work and have a few more amenities than we'd had so far. We'd have septic and water, so running the generator shouldn't be too big of a deal. S could drive separately, spend most of the break with us, and drive home a few days early so he could go do the things that he needed to do. What in past experience made me think that this could happen? True to his word, the septic guy installed the system on Thursday, March 5th. We'd also arranged for him to deliver some crusher run rocks for the path to the water and large riprap rocks for some landscaping and drainage issues. I drove down that day to pay him and discuss where we wanted those 2 loads of rock to be dropped when he delivered them on Friday. I did have some concern about the positioning of the septic system when I saw it. It was the correct area, but I wasn't entirely sure about how it was situated. I'm not an expert, and Jay had been coordinating this project, so I kept my mouth shut and I went home. The riprap rocks were indeed delivered the next day to the front edge of the pad area. The plan was to use those to reinforce and landscape the front edge, since we'd had problems with that area during heavy rains last year. Jay and I drove back down that Saturday to do a few small jobs, confirm if the water was installed, and generally get a feel for where we were. You guys, it was so bad. The water hadn't been installed, but to be fair, 2 weeks would be the following Tuesday. Okay, no big deal. But everything else, the septic tank was far, far bigger than what we need. I'm fairly certain it's bigger than the one we have for our house. And they didn't do the best job of burying it. More like they dug half a hole, placed it with half of it sticking up, and then pushed the removed dirt somewhat on top of it and next to it. It's still technically correct, but my once somewhat flat walking area was now blocked by this massive concrete block and a random dirt hill that made navigating the area impossible now. They also drove the machinery over the collapsed hill behind the pad, making it more unstable than it already was. And they knocked the trees that were holding back what was there out of place. It had stormed the night before, so now that area was running into the pad even more. The border trees had floated onto the pad, and the dirt they randomly placed in the septic area was now also running down the hill. The added bonus was that there was new sinkholes that had developed in this area where they didn't or couldn't pack the dirt. In addition to all that, when they delivered the riprap, they made massive ruts in the gravel pad. These were now filled with water. I know it was not pristine level place that it was when the excavation guy finished last spring, but it was at least usable. Now, there was absolutely no freaking way we could park a car on it, let alone the camper. I also realized at this point that the plan for the front edge and the rocks absolutely was not going to work the way Jay wanted. In fact, it was the complete opposite of what I had sketched out and planned for the landscape, as well as physically impossible. I know part of the issue here is that I don't do well with the change in plans, and this was a lot all at once, but I just sat down in the gravel and cried. We left shortly after, getting nothing done and just feeling defeated. I was trying to brainstorm ideas and ways to fix it, but had nothing. I was really tired of paying for things and not getting what I expected. You've already heard the stories about why we didn't have a cabin, a house, trailer, or RV on the land, and we'd paid a small fortune last year for the site work installing the path to the water, the driveway, and the gravel pad area that was currently all washing downhill. Now I'd paid another chunk of money on water that wasn't there, the supplies to run the water, and for a septic system that had completely ruined all of my plans, as well as kickstarting the sliding and flooding issue again. And speaking of plans, it was beginning to look more and more likely that my spring break plans were going to change too. After I'd calmed down some, it was obvious that something had to change. This was not working, and we were at the edge of the budget. I'm not keen on cutting into our other expenses for the sake of this side quest, even if it is a big one that's important to me. I started searching the internet for ways to stop the sliding. It had to be somewhat affordable, something we could do ourselves, and work with the land instead of against it. Somewhere in there, I stumbled on terracing with Gabion boxes. While I was searching, I actually found a property nearby to ours that had actually done Gabion boxes. And look, these were filled with riprap. We just happened to have about 8 tons of that sitting on the pad. I also decided that we no longer have a need for such a large pad area now that we weren't going to put a tiny home, park model, etc. on it. So we're going to shorten the pad to 20 feet wide instead of 40 to 55. And use railroad ties to terrace some steps down to an eating area. Unfortunately, with the landsliding and the septic tank being so high up, we're going to have to raise the front edge of the new pad area up somewhere between 3 and 4 feet. Hopefully, we will have enough gravel from bringing that edge back to do that without buying more gravel. Installing GeoGrid will help a little bit with the height, too. I also decided that we needed to put a fire pit area on the flat area below the pad. Both the dining area and fire pit area need some sort of walkable ground cover, so that's where the large amounts of Irish moss come in. The terraced Gabion boxes will hold the hill in place, as well as giving me a place to plant things that will also mitigate water and runoff. It will also bury and hide the side of the septic tank. Behind the Gabions, we installed a drainage system to divert the water around the pad instead of through the pad. As we were installing the drainage system, we did discover another spring, so this was definitely a good idea. Our Gabion boxes are made from galvanized 2-inch by 4-inch field fencing from Rural King. I have plans to film myself making one of these boxes very soon. I can do 3 to 4 boxes in a day, and the bulk of the time is because I'm very particular about twisting the ends so they don't snag or catch on anything. We had also been pricing renting equipment to accomplish some of the things we'd planned. We'd need something to move dirt and gravel, and we'd need something to dig the trenches for the water and electric lines. Looking at the daily, weekly, and monthly rates for renting equipment was adding up fast. We also knew timelines were incredibly unreliable. You already know how long we've been waiting on electricity, and we were approaching 3 weeks of not having water installed. We also had not had the crusher run that had been paid for delivered yet, and we were 2 weeks out from that. Trying to plan and coordinate a rental with installs was looking impossible. In the end, we decided it was cheaper to buy one of those cheap, slightly sketchy mini excavators. A local used car dealer had a few new ones sitting on his lot. Jay side quested into researching all the things he needed to know before buying one. We ended up getting a pretty good deal for significantly less than we could have rented bigger equipment. It does take a little more time, but so far, we're pretty happy with it. In the meantime, we were rapidly approaching spring break. Taking the RV down was looking increasingly grim. We already knew we had nowhere level to park, no electricity, and the water was appearing unlikely. The weather forecast shifted as the week went on and was not going to cooperate either. It looked wild, and I wasn't sure we wanted to experience it in a camper. Ultimately, I ended up booking a campsite at the Corinth recreation area from Tuesday through Sunday, cutting spring break short on the front end, but boy, am I glad I did. We were expecting severe storms and torrential rain Sunday night, and that was not going to bode well for the runoff problem. It was a perfect setup for a huge mess. So we took the mini excavator and drainage things down on Saturday and worked all day that day, as well as most of Sunday, trying to beat the weather. It was quite warm both days with highs in the mid-80s, and I wasn't really prepared for that in March. Sunday night went as expected with torrential rain, high wind, hail, and the possibility of tornadoes. We had the laundry room ready at the house in case we needed to shelter, and Hobbs and Pandora were ready for it. We ended up not needing it, thankfully, but the water situation at Camp Cowcumber was a lot. You can kind of see it on the trail cam. However, it looked like it was slightly better than the runoff the prior week, so even though the water mitigation was only partially done, it looked like it just might work. I'm sure that being in the forest in an RV in those winds would have been not only dangerous, but terrifying. The big surprise was that the next morning it started snowing and kept going for a big chunk of the day. We got a solid dusting, probably more snow than we've gotten all winter, but it was melted by that evening. As much as I was annoyed with the change to my plans, I'm really glad that I was able to pivot and move the camping from Friday to Tuesday. It was a little chilly Tuesday night, but we definitely had a much more enjoyable experience moving both the dates and the location. Like I mentioned before, I booked a site at Corinth Recreation Area in Double Springs, Alabama for 5 nights, Tuesday through Sunday. The 5 nights cost $230 plus an additional $8 online booking fee. That comes out to $46 a night, which honestly wasn't bad because at the beginning of March, it cost us roughly $25 in diesel if we took the truck to the lake and back, which we were because we were hauling things back and forth as well. By the time I booked the site, the prices were already creeping up and we were spending $35 a trip. And by the time we drove down, the cost had jumped to roughly $38 a trip. And that was with our open roads discount. I know when I drove down to Birmingham on the 9th, it was not uncommon to see diesel prices at around $5.15 a gallon on the interstate. But I'm using the numbers I have receipts for, so just know that if we didn't have that discount, the price deltas would have been much larger. I'm also using an average of 20 miles per gallon for this math. If we're not hauling things like the four-wheeler, we get a bit better. And if we have the camper, it's actually closer to 11 miles per gallon, and those numbers are even worse. So staying 10 minutes away instead of 90 was much easier on both us and our wallet. I'll drop my Open Roads referral code in the comments if you're interested. What made us finally sign up is that they now allow you to attach a credit card to the account instead of a debit card. They do charge something like a 2 or 3% fee for that, but I will not use a debit card ever. Too much liability and not enough protection. To mitigate that fee, I have our Costco Visa attached to the account. It gives 5% cash back on fuel purchases, so I come out slightly ahead with that in fees, and I'm still getting a significant discount at the pump. Or I should say that Jay gets a big discount because my car is electric. I'm going on my 3rd year of ownership, and I could not be happier, especially with all the trips to Birmingham and the lake. Anyway, back from that side quest, I booked Site 40 in the Firefly Loop at Corinth. Per usual, there wasn't a lot to choose from since I was booking so late. However, we were one of 3 sites occupied in that loop Tuesday through Friday outside of our camp hosts. Friday afternoon, it did fill up significantly, and most sites were full through the weekend. I suspect the local schools had their spring break the week after ours because a lot of the tags were somewhat local and there were a bunch of kids. Despite booking so late and not having much choice, our site was waterfront with a lovely view. You couldn't access the water from it, but you wouldn't want to, considering the temperatures had just been in the 20s with snow. I was pleasantly surprised with the campground. Everything was neat and well kept. Check in and out was easy as well. I was concerned when I booked the Firefly Loop because many of the 2025 reviews mentioned that the camp hosts for that area were not great. We were very happy to learn that the camp hosts had only been there a few days and were absolutely lovely and helpful with the few questions we had. I hope they're there for the whole season and have a great time. The sites were large and spaced out well with an excellent sunshade mix. We could easily park both our truck and S's car within the designated area at our site. I kind of wish we hadn't been so busy while we were staying there because the Corinth recreation area seems like it has a good deal to explore. There are several trails, a campground accessible boat launch, and a large day use area. We didn't really use any of the amenities because by the time we got back every evening and got everyone fed, we were exhausted and it was getting dark. I'd definitely like to stay there again, preferably during the warmer months, to get a better feel for the place. The funniest part about the area is the road leading to the gatehouse. Winston County is not exactly known for their excellent roads. In fact, they're probably actually known for how horrifically bad their roads are on average. A significantly large portion of the county roads are not paved at all, and the ones that are more pothole than pavement. The main road out to Double Springs is Highway 278, which is a federal highway, so it's decent for the most part. Then you turn on to County Road 57, and you take that a few miles until you get to the entrance of the park. The running joke we have is that County Road 57 is probably the nicest and best maintained county road in the entire area. It's so noticeable that we had commented on this back in 2024 when we were house and property hunting, because we had looked at several places off of that road, and as soon as you turned off, the other roads got horrifically bad fast. In fact, our second choice place is off of that road, and we side quested one morning to go see if anything had changed. Even though the road to Camp Cowcumber is pretty rough, I think the drive out there really did cement the fact that we made the right decision. It wasn't the only reason we feel that way, but it is a significant chunk of it. They definitely have some wildlife in the Corinth recreation area, although I'm not exactly sure what that wildlife is exactly. Our second night there, I was sitting alone by the fire pit and everyone else was inside the camper because they're antisocial and they suck. I was relaxing and had my feet propped up on the edge of the fire ring. Suddenly, I hear walking in the leaves behind me. There are no walking areas or paths behind our site, just a small wooded area with a path to the water from the backside. It really sounded like a corgi tromping through the leaves, but Radar was inside the camper as well. I had left the main door of the camper open and the screen door shut, so it's not like I was isolated, but I completely panicked nonetheless. I jump up, slide my feet into my slides, and run across the campsite up the stairs. Well, run probably isn't the right word because I more or less trip up the stairs and bang my left knee into either the steps or the metal door frame of the RV. And then I fell into the camper, onto the floor, and pulled the door behind me. Now, everyone is on alert because all they know is that I have ran into the camper, shaken the whole thing, and am now piled behind the door on the floor. Once I caught my breath and explained what happened, everyone cracked up laughing. I mean, fair, but I'll also note that none of the kids were willing to walk Radar after dark the rest of the week. We heard it almost every night after that, but never did figure out exactly what kind of animal we were dealing with. But based on the speed and the proximity to the ground, we're pretty sure it was a few armadillos. And that's how I nearly died because of the Murd3r armadillo, and because I'm completely uncoordinated. I make note of which knee I hit during my lurch across the campsite because a few weeks earlier, I had been working on the rock ledge just below the pad at the lake. It's roughly a 5-foot drop to the area below, so when I went to move from one place to another, I jumped down. I don't know if I just didn't stick the landing or the fact that I'm older than I think, but my right knee has been angry ever since, requiring me to use a knee brace whenever I'm doing things for a long stretch of time or the terrain is uneven. The left-right motion nearly ends me. So after the Murd3r armadillo incident, I now have 2 bad knees, and one of them is a lovely shade of purpley green now. Since I'm on the subject of hurting myself, I guess it's a nice segue into the other injuries I earned over spring break. After the first day of building the Gabion cages, we figured out that Jay making them and me moving dirt wasn't the most efficient use of our skills. So when I'd finished leveling and grading where the boxes would go, we sort of swapped roles. And I have to say, I think I've gotten pretty good at building the boxes. I mentioned it before, but I can knock one out in about an hour if I try really hard. But since I do get obsessive about wrapping the cut ends, 90 minutes to 2 hours is more accurate. I think they're works of art when I'm done, though. Anyway, the cut ends are sharp and I'm less than careful. I also sit on the ground and use my legs to balance the wire, since the fence panels tend to curve because they come on a roll. So by the end of the week, my legs and arms were covered in a significant amount of cuts and scrapes. It almost looked like I had walked through a glass door or something. I wish I had taken pictures. And yes, I've had my tetanus shot. I also bruise easily, and if you couldn't already tell, I'm clumsy as hell. So doing all the dirt and rock moving and just generally working earned me some pretty impressive bruises as well. I know that one of the ones on my arm is where I somehow dropped one of the larger rip-rap rocks on it while carrying it, and one of the bruises on my leg is where I hit it with the truck door. But I really have no clue on how I got the rest of them. By Friday, I had to go to the store, and I was wearing shorts and a t-shirt and was embarrassed to go in public because I looked so bad. People were super nice to me, though. So far, I've overreacted to an animal, tried to put my leg through the RV, and gotten a significant number of cuts and bruises. On top of that, I'm older than I think. I've had arthritis in my hands and neck since my 20s, and I've had a few bouts of carpal tunnel flares over the years. So I'm always in some amount of pain, and I tend to ignore it and end up overdoing it. After 5 days straight of doing labor that I'm not used to and 4 days of holding pliers tightly, as well as shovels and rakes, my body completely rebelled. By Sunday, I could barely move my neck or my right arm, and both hands were not great. It's now Thursday of the next week, and I've been really taking it easy. I've recovered a lot, but my right hand to my elbow is not great. That's one of the reasons it's taken me so long to do this video. I can't write, type, or use my mouse like I normally can, so everything is taking forever. Camera setups and editing to script writing. Oh my gosh, can you imagine how much more rambling these would be if I didn't script? Ugh. It's just a slow process right now. YouTube is going to be angry that I'm not posting on my regular weekly-ish schedule, but it can kiss my grits right now. You have to go easy with the KT tape because I'm allergic to the adhesives long term, and wrist braces are just annoying, but I'm trying. I did go over to Harbor Freight this week for better gloves and hopefully more ergonomic pliers to mitigate some of the damage. So we'll see. So I guess I'll end this with the story about Radar living his best life. I mean, he's spoiled as hell and pretty much does what he wants, but he's also completely untrustworthy. If I had one phrase to describe his 3.5 years on this planet, it would be flight risk. He does not listen, has no loyalty, no chill, and zero sense of self-preservation. He never, ever gets to go outside without being contained. At the house, he has a large fenced backyard that we check the perimeter of frequently. At any other time, he is out on a tie-out or a leash. When we're at the lake, he has a 40-foot coated wire lead he's attached to, so he has room to roam, but he can't leave or chew through it. He has this weird obsession with starting engines, though. Never cars, really, but if you're starting a chainsaw or the four-wheeler, he gets really animated and jumps and barks. The mini excavator starting is a whole other situation. I can't tell if he loves it or hates it, but he absolutely must be right there, barking, jumping, and carrying on when you start it. By Friday, it was a thing. Jay was across the pad, out of Radar's reach, starting the excavator, when Radar realized he was about to start it. Radar starts running full speed at Jay and completely snaps the clips on his collar. He's never done anything remotely like this before. We'd been out there working. We have the younger two boys, but S has already left to go back home, so we have no way to replace or fix the collar at that time. I tell the younger boys they have one job, to make sure Radar stays with us the rest of the day. And by some miracle, Radar has decided he'll stay with us if we don't tie him out. We did replace his collar later that day, but he remained free range at the lake the rest of the weekend, and he did a really great job staying with us. Whenever he'd get too far, one of us would call him back and he'd actually listen. That is wild. The funniest thing was on Saturday. We had taken a break to eat lunch on one of the lower levels near the water. A boat floated by and Radar decided he needed to bark at them. It's a bit rockier towards the water and it's somewhat narrow through there. So when he barked, he got this huge echo. He stopped, looked at me with this excited look on his face that was like, "Mom, did you hear that?" And then he did it again to see if it would echo, and it did. He was so excited and carried on for a few minutes until the novelty wore off. We all agreed it was the funniest thing, and that if dogs could have an expression of excitement, Radar definitely did just that. I really wish I had videoed it or taken pictures or something because it was so funny. Radar spent the majority of Saturday free-ranging the property, exploring things, and napping in the dirt. I think he was legitimately mad when we got in the truck Sunday and came home instead of going to the property. We'll most likely head down 1 or 2 days this weekend to work, and we'll continue to let him roam as long as he behaves. We'll see how it goes. Anyway, that's how we spent our spring break, staying close to home and working on Camp Cowcumber. I called the water company on Thursday of that week just to check in, and they said I was on the schedule for Friday after lunch. I got a phone call mid-morning Friday telling me they'd broken something, so I had been pushed to Monday. Had we somehow managed to get the RV there, we never would have had running water and would have had no way to fill the tanks. So even with a generator, staying there would have been more trouble than it was worth. So punting and staying nearby with full hookups was 100% the right choice. I haven't gotten any more calls from the water company, so I assume they installed the water on Monday as promised, but I have no way of knowing until I go back out there. Tuesday was 1 month from me paying the deposit and the water department putting the order in, which is more than the 2 weeks stated, but we already knew that nothing happens on a tight timeline in Winston County. That's all I have for now. If you want to see if I have a nervous breakdown before we have utilities at the lake, hit the subscribe button. Radar would like you to boop the like button as well. I have several other side quests in mind, but if there's anything you'd like me to ramble about, drop a comment and let me know. Otherwise, leave me an emoji. It seems really dumb, but likes and comments really make a difference. And I do like talking to y'all since my kids are at the age where they think I'm ridiculous. Until next time.